everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa Allistway, and on this channel, you will find a variety of inspirational and informational videos. So if that sounds good to you and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. My guest today is Pavandeep Singh, who is an eye surgeon and was a contestant on the reality show SAS Who Dares Win, Season 5. This show is designed to replicate a number of elements of the actual United Kingdom Special Forces. The contestants are taken through hostile and unforgiving warfare environments while testing their mental and physical ability through a series of tests. Welcome, Pavandeep.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
So nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So first question is, why would you sign up for this super difficult reality show called SAS Who Dares Wins?
I guess, why not? I was a big fan of the show from when it began. Prior to that, I've always been interested in the military, just as a young boy growing up. I think I always had a bit of a martial aspect to my view on life, I guess, most partly due to my faith as well. And as a young boy growing up, I held soldiers, and then for the pinnacle of soldiering, i.e. the special forces, with very high respect and regard, and always saw them as you could say the pinnacle of human performance in very arduous and difficult conditions. And then obviously being in the UK, you are aware of your own armed forces, and the SAS have always held a degree of a legendary status. You heard about them, these kind of shadow warriors who would appear and disappear, and the job would have been completed in those short moments. So yeah, I grew up with that, and the show began a few years. I can't remember when it began actually, but you was always watching it. Big fan, and always trying to take things from it, and trying to apply them to day-to-day life. And then eventually you start asking the question. You're watching it one day and you wonder, well, I wonder if there must be some kind of application process. How do these people on it get on it? And then it was a bit of a Google, not too difficult, and I just went ahead and filled in the application form, and then the rest was history, as they say.
Awesome. So what was the application process like? What were they looking for, and what did you have to answer, pass before on to get selected?
So you have to, obviously it's a TV production as well. So it's actually, all that aspect is run by the production company who ran it back then. And initially you just have to fill in a online, quite extensive form about yourself. Lots of questions about your background, any your most stressful experiences, what life means to you, why you do stuff. So quite an in-depth exploration of what makes you. And you send that off, and I assume someone in production goes through all of those and picks out relatively interesting people, because there's you could say there's the militaristic aspect of it, which the directing staff deliver. Then there's also the TV aspect, which is unavoidable and inextricably linked, because it's a TV show at the end of the day. So the production company want to bring together certain individuals, right? So they have a kind of mix. You're then called up if you're found to be interesting enough to the fitness tests, which are back then were held. This is prior to COVID, so people were still mixing as normal. Just to various sites across the country, like school halls or community halls, where the basic physical fitness tests were conducted. They mirrored what was, I believe, at that time, similar British military entrance tests. So they composed of, there was a run, which was, when we did it, it was the bleep test, which is the quite a common fitness test. And you had a score which you had to meet on the bleep test. Previous years, it used to be the 1.5-mile run to be achieved in under 9 minutes and 30 seconds. That used to be, I remember reading that was a staple of the Special Forces selection process, not the actual selection, but the criteria to begin selection. And then there's the military kind of push-up tests, sit-up tests under a certain amount of sandbag carries, jerry can carries. And to be honest, if you're relatively fit and you train specifically for them with the aim that you know you're going to go and do, it's not too difficult if you give yourself a few weeks, a couple of months or so. And that's it. And you do that, and then you pass the physical. Then you kind of put into a pool of candidates who have passed the physical test. After which you conduct an interview with one of the production team, and again they just ask you about yourself. And after all that, they contact you individually if you're going to make it to the show.
Okay. And so what was the time frame as far as getting picked and then being on the show? And then what did you do to prepare yourself mentally and physically for the show?
The testing phase that I've just described was for me around about June, July-ish. And then about, I'd say late August, maybe early September, I was contacted to say they were interested in having me on. But I was very poor in the water, so I was told that they needed to see some basic proficiency, a length or so of swimming before they confirmed my place, which would have been then, we went away in early October of 2019. So roughly, you say I had about 6 weeks, say 4 to 6 weeks before we were going to go off. But training for that, you kind of, if you're sensible, you would start to train as if you are going to go on prior to knowing that you're going to go on. Because if you don't, there's, it's money in the bank. You've invested in yourself. You've got fitter. I'd already started doing extra running, a bit of hill work. I had my baseline fitness, which is mostly strength based. So I started working more around the kind of cardiovascular endurance, like I mentioned, hill work. But when I got the call, and it was kind of I wouldn't say bad luck, it's just luck of the draw that the series I was going to go on had to be quite a marine-based series rather than mostly ground-based. So I had to really find people to try and teach me to swim. And that took up a lot of those final weeks of preparation of just trying to be able to move somewhat in the water.
Wow. Yeah. So your season 5 was held in Scotland, and I have to admit it was one of my favorite seasons because it was just gorgeous scenery, and they had you day 1 in the water, in the freezing water, swimming, which you said wasn't exactly one of your strong suits. What was it like day 1 being thrown into that?
I'm trying to remember. What was day 1? Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. It was just crazy because it started off at like 3 a.m. or so on the Friday, and we were told to have our breakfast, which was just some sandwiches and crisps and whatnot. They did well to keep it all hush hush. So we went there all dressed up in our trousers, normal trousers, jackets, waterproof jackets, bag on your back, and walked out to the harbor. And we had to wait there for about an hour and a half. I think there'd been a delay with the boats. Then some speed boats came along, and there's rubber boats that they have in the Special Forces. They came along, and we had to bundle onto those. And we had about, I must have been an hour or 2 journey in the sea, on the sea. As it was quite nice because the dawn broke as we were on the sea, and then we had the dolphins come alongside us. So that was quite nice. And then at some point we stopped, and then the directing staff got on the boats, and then it kind of became quite real because you see or just the telly on the TV, and now here they were. And from the get-go, they were just kind of giving us orders and telling people to shut up, stop laughing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the first task was to just jump. The first task was to jump off the speeding boat as it was in motion and swim to shore. And sudden water shock, cold shock, which, you know, I wasn't good enough. So I could barely manage to do a length in the pool. We had what they were, obviously they're sensible. They had done a safety assessment. So people like me, there was myself and another recruit who were classified as poor swimmers. So we had a life jacket on underneath, but you know, that stops you from sinking, but it doesn't really make any much easier. So, you know, my turn came and it was Billy Billingham who was on my boat, and he just gets you up on the side. On the side is quite bouncy because it's a rubber boat. So you're just standing there and he just gives you a slap on the back and you just have to jump in, and you jump into the water, and it's sudden shock, and you just try to keep your composure. So you just, you know, make sure your breathing's right. And I had developed some kind of, I wouldn't call it a backstroke, but when I was practicing, I could get on my back, stay afloat, and kind of move. So I did that. But the thing is, it's so cold, and even the good swimmers, I mean, some people made it to the end, which is great, but you know, the cold just stops your limbs from moving. You're okay up here, but you can just feel the signals not getting through, and you just kind of start seizing up. So that was a shock. I had, obviously, then you have the safety boats, they pull you out and then they bring you in closer. And then we were put on the beach, and we were kind of what we call beasted on the beach. It's just difficult physical challenges, stripped down to the underwear and kind of crawling through nettles and all that. And that is just designed to shock you and break your will, really, and to see. And that claimed 2 people at the start. It was, you know, they probably were pretty strong, fit guys, and they would have been done well, but it's the mind, isn't it? The mind kind of gets a bit of a whoo like that. So and then you kind of have to just, you know, get through that. And you got to know that, you know it's going to be hard. That's what you sign up for.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the staff, you know, talks about, is that they expose your flaws. So, and your weaknesses. I mean, under these environments, if you are, you know, deluded about your capabilities or whatever, those will get exposed. And I think that's why it's so appealing to watch, because it's such a raw and honest course, and we get to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, exactly. And actually it's appealing to watch, and it's really appealing to do for that very reason, because that, you know, the whole ability to have an opportunity where your weaknesses can be exposed like that is really fruitful to the individual. Because unless you're crazy, you're not going to put yourself through that willingly. You know, you can't really push yourself that hard, and in those circumstances. So it's a welcome test to those who go and do it, if you're of that mindset, you know, because only by exposing that weakness you can then develop yourself.
So you're put through a lot of challenges, but also you are sleep deprived. Your calories are lower, so you're probably hungry. So there's a lot of other things. You're freezing cold. So there's a lot of challenges that you have to overcome. How did you deal with those like low moments and those difficult situations?
Yeah, it's constantly cold, pretty much wet all the time, and food is quite scarce. I think you kind of, your sphere of control becomes very small. You know, when you're in your normal life, you control lots of stuff. You know, you can control what you can eat, where you can sleep, drink, etc. And you're in comfortable situations. But there are a lot of things are stripped from you. So sleep is stripped from you, food is stripped from you, warmth is stripped from you. You have to start realizing that your influence of control is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, until you are at some point just left with your mind and your will and your heart and whatever drives you. I think it helps to have made a plan beforehand, just how far you're willing to go, and what you're willing to tolerate. And my plan was that no matter what happened, I would never quit. And that was kind of non-negotiable in my head. And there were many times I wanted to quit, because I remember certain times when we'll be all woken up in the middle of the night and asked to go in 30 seconds to the parade square and be physically beasted for an hour. And I remember waking, I'd totally forgotten where I was because I was in such a deep sleep and my whole body was shaking. And I just thought, nah, I can't do this anymore. But that's okay because my brain was saying that, my body was shaking, but I wasn't going to act on it. There was a little control center up here somewhere that, although you feel like quitting, you're like, now we'll just you hold on, and you just know there's no option for you to quit. So you got to make that contract with yourself, I think, beforehand. You got to believe in that, and I think that's the way to get through it. You're not there for fun. It's going to be hard. If you've had the luxury, and we did, I've seen the previous series. I know how difficult it is. It's more so than what you see on the So you take what you're given. You take what food you're given. You enjoy what you have. You savor the small things. If you do find the socks are a bit dry, you enjoy it. If you get some sleep, so you got to take the little blessings, really.
Yeah. So your season definitely had some interesting characters, and you also had females in your season, which I thought was really enlightening. And there was one task where you had to box each other. And as a female watching that, it was hard to watch. And I imagine as a male, it was hard to watch because you saw men punching women under these circumstances, which in war, there is no rules. So that could happen in a warlike situation. And then obviously you learn later on the female was in a domestic abuse situation and she never fought back, and going through that task actually helped give her some strength and maybe make peace with that situation. How did you feel watching that whole scene? Because I would imagine that was a hard one to partake in.
Yeah, well, I have to admit, when you're there, I don't think I gave myself, you don't have the luxury to kind of think about it too much. I don't think that's a good idea, because your mindset there has to be very different, because like you said, it's simulating warfare. I don't know what I would have done if I had to face a female. I'll be honest, I hadn't prepared myself for that. To watch, the females were faced off against females, but there were matches where it was male against female. Everyone was quite good friends, all the recruits. So you're hoping for the best for both of them, yeah? And generally speaking, the guys were sensible. So you're not gonna hold back. You mustn't, you're not allowed to. And you have to respect that element of that task. But you have, as what they want you to do, as if you were to be a soldier of that level, you hold back, but you don't hold back, if that makes sense. You do enough to challenge the opponent, but you're not going to knock their head off. If it's easy for you to knock their head off, you don't need to go that far. I didn't get too emotional watching any of my colleagues, because I knew they were fine. I knew they were strong. They're there for a reason. They know what to do. They're in good hands. The DS were watching them. And like you said, it was very liberating for some of them.
Yes, and the one that I'm talking about in particular was against the mole. Y'all had a mole, somebody who was actually a SAS officer, but was pretending to be one of the regulars. And so he was the one that was actually fighting her. And so I'm sure it was super controlled. So my question to you is, did you guys have an inkling or an idea that something was off about that guy? Like, he seems too good, or he's holding back. Did any of y'all have that as a feeling?
But just back to their fight, also, we never knew about their backstories to that degree, so we wouldn't have known that people were suffering from abuse. So as far as we knew, we knew the bare basics about each other as well. Regarding Jamie the mole,
Jamie the mole.
Now he was nice. He was a good lad. He was competent. He didn't really stick out, although he did. I think sometimes we joked to him because he just looked a bit military. He had that look in his eyes, the hair.
He was super fit.
he was really fair. I mean, then he got in trouble a few times, but that was, I think that probably subconsciously threw us off the scent. Yeah, I mean, I think there were a few names bandied about saying, oh, they might be the mole, but I don't think personally I thought much of him. I thought he's good, but he did well to blend in.
Okay.
And then he with himself, yeah, at the end.
So you guys knew that there would be a mole in your season, or you did not?
We weren't sure. So I think in the previous season there was a mole.
Okay, so the possibility.
Yeah, I remember my thought process was, I thought if there was one in the last season, there probably isn't one this season, but I should have obviously thought differently. But you know, the other thing is, it's not really something to get to to get yourself, you know, wound up on too much, because it doesn't really matter, does it, if there's a mole or not? You just as long as you do what you're there to do, then that shouldn't really affect you as a recruit.
Okay. Okay, so obviously, let's talk a little bit about the pain and suffering and that component of all of this. And obviously, you're volunteering to go through the pain and the suffering. You're asking for it. You're wanting it. And what is the value of that pain and suffering?
Okay, that's a good question. The value of the pain and suffering is that it, like I said before, it exposes you to a degree of intensity that you wouldn't have experienced otherwise. And I do believe that I don't think what we experienced there was, I had not even imagined that level of intensity, you know, beforehand. You think of it like a really hard workout or some kind of difficult event, but you can't imagine what they do to you unless you've gone through it. What it does is, it does, like they say, it does really expose you to yourself and to them as well, who are watching you. It lets you, I think, because we all have images in our head of who we are, what we want to be, and we kind of sometimes have a exterior person face that we want the world to see, or that we want ourselves to see. But what that pain and suffering does, it kind of really strips all that away, and you are left, because your influence of the pain and suffering is designed to make your influence of control get shorter and shorter and shorter, until you're just left with yourself, and in a very difficult physical situation, emotional situation, mental situation. And it's like this little thing just, you know, lying there, and you have to decide, you know, what actually are you? You have to ask yourself that question, and it reveals that to you, and it reveals all your weaknesses. So once you come out of the show and of the course, and you look back, you can, if you're true with yourself, only you know what was going on in your head at certain times, and what your motivations were at certain times, and whether you truly working hard enough, or were you coasting, you know, trying to just blend in with the crowd. And only you will know the truth of that. And then you can decide what you want to do with it. You can either just ignore it and come up with excuses, or you can accept it and you can say, well, yeah, I kind of bottled it there, or I could have done better, I had something in the tank. And that's fine, because if you come out of it and you learn from it, that pain and that suffering, they teach you, you know, they show you what you truly are. And then they teach you, if you accept the pain and suffering in the course, they teach you that you can deal with anything. And I truly believe that. And one of the main things that happened when I came out of the course was, I felt that if I'm ever presented with any obstacle, surely nothing could top this, you know, what we've been through. And it gives your mind that real positive self-belief. And, you know, that doesn't mean you have to see the end. Sometimes it's like you're in the tunnel, but you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're just in complete darkness. But the course taught me that even if I'm in that situation, if you keep grinding, if you keep going at it, there will be a way through. And I think that was a mentality they were trying to drill into us. And I'm always been really grateful for that lesson.
It reminds me of David Goggins. He talks about callousing the mind, you know.
That's
and
exactly
so I think,
it.
yeah.
Mind, yeah.
Yeah, so that you get
Goggins said,
stronger. I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
Goggins said, Goggins' line, which I've repeated countless times, is he says, on the other end of suffering is a beautiful world. I remembered that, and truly, when I came out of there, the world did look different. And the calmness, the clarity of mind you have when you come out of there, you just see, and all the stuff that we worry about that drives us crazy, and in the things we kind of allow to take up space in our heads, you realize just how futile it all is, and that if you have a bigger goal in life, what your greatest goal is that you've decided for yourself, that's all that matters. And the pain and suffering really help to kind of drill through that and make that very clear.
And it's so many people see it counterintuitive, because they think, gosh, who wants the pain? Pain hurts. Pain is difficult. A lot of people retreat from trying to, accept and actually, I guess, push into the pain. And so there is a connection there between the physical and the emotional, and how it blends with the other side of suffering that you talked about.
That's right. And I think if you push yourself, you're right. It's by going to those places, you kind of show yourself that it's possible to survive in those places, and you may not always get through it, but you'll always come out with more experience and better learning and more knowledge of yourself. And it's a continuous process of testing yourself. And I always felt that's one path to happiness as well.
It's that never-ending self-improvement, right? You never reach the pinnacle. There's always a new day, a new challenge, a new experience.
Exactly. So I mean, I'm a man of faith, so I'm quite strongly believe in my faith, and I believe in a God, and to me, God is, you can define in many ways, but I think I'd like to think that across the faiths, describing God as perfection is, people will agree with that, people who believe in God. And I always think man was made in his image, and we have this opportunity in our lifetime. In the Sikh faith, we believe is a chance to connect with the Lord. So to me, part of it is this constant improvement, is to take this opportunity as a human being right now and try and reach my greatest potential, which is by constantly testing, constantly not trying to stay in a comfort zone and always pushing beyond it. And in a weird kind of way, I think that form of training is also a form of worship, because you're maximizing the chances, the opportunities, the potentials that have been given to you in this blessed human life that you've been very lucky to receive. And what better way of kind of showing gratitude to him, the Lord, that's given you this chance, than by putting your foot down and pedal to the metal and try and take it all the way.
So if you don't mind touching on your faith and how that has helped you through these difficult tasks and difficult times, what kind of benefits has it given you?
So yeah, I mean, there's two aspects you could probably say. There's the spiritual aspect of, I'd say things like the concept of trying to accept God's will, which is one aspect of the Sikh faith. So you kind of see things. It's also a Stoic concept, the amor fati, which is, love thy fate. So whatever happens, you just try to, you love it and you accept it as his will, and you just get on with it, right? So you see good in all things that happen, and it's a very positive outlook. You don't complain, you just find a way around it. You think, this has happened for a reason, I've been given this for a reason. In the Sikh faith, we have a concept it's called Jardi Kala, which means high spirits in loose translation. And it's essentially trying to always keep high spirits, a positive outlook. So there's that. There's also, again, the pain and suffering of physicality makes the mind pulls the mind into a degree of control. It's not going all over the place. When you're suffering, and even if you're training at the gym or you're doing a hard workout, you will benefit if you bring your mind into a degree of silence and focus, mindfulness, being present in the moment. Yeah. And as a Sikh, that's very important, because we pray, we meditate, we need to control the mind, right? So, and the Sikh gurus, they advocated the physical as well as the spiritual. So there was a concept of the warrior saint, which was an individual which is adept at both combat, martial arts, but also meditation and spirituality. And these things came together in that ideal of the warrior saint. Because it's the mind and the body which work as one. And if the mind isn't under control, then the body won't be under control. And if you use the physical stimulus of training, you can help to bring the mind under control as well. And then historical examples I had, so that was kind of because of the spiritual, philosophical, very brief overview. Historical examples we had, there's lots of great Sikh warriors that I've known about, learned about, that we had in the past, men and women that were tortured and that didn't give up. Basically, they held on to their ideals. Because where we were in Punjab, the Sikhs, northwest India, which is Punjab area, all the invaders came through there. So the Afghans, the Turks, the Persians. So we bore the brunt of it, and Sikhs were often killed left, right, and center, or killed at sight. So it was a convert or die ultimatum to Sikhs, and they held their nerve. And we had the Sikh gurus, we had 10 prophets, 10 gurus, and one of them, the fifth guru, was tortured, and when he's being tortured, his scriptures which he wrote were to say that the will of God is sweet for me. All I desire is the remembrance of his name. And that wasn't just a great act in the sense of just doing a great act, or a miracle or whatever. That was a lesson to us. That was to say, this is the path that I've described, but this is me now also walking that path. So to show you guys that it can be done. And, if I can do it, you can do it. So it's a kind of very positive, high spirits mentality where, you maintain that. And the Sikhs of old maintained that throughout very difficult circumstances. So I have that in my life to kind of look back at and think, well, that's the warrior heritage from which I descend. I grew up watching the samurai movies, the Spartan movies, the Viking movies. And then I thought, well, that's great, and I love them. But I thought, you also have a great heritage of your own, and, one of the last remaining warrior races. So you got to push that envelope, push the boundaries, and just try and be the best you can be.
That is so cool. It's in your DNA. And I think that's cool that you can call on that and honor it.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So I want to ask about Aunt Middleton. He is an interesting fella. And what was it like kind of being under his leadership, and what did you learn from him?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, okay. He's interesting because he has the persona of the chief instructor, on the show. So some of the other guys will kind of talk to you normally, but I mean, he did as well, but he is intimidating. He's very intimidating. And oftentimes you would see his silhouette as you came around the corner of the road or on the sea, arms crossed, you knew trouble was going to happen to you, right? But, he's on the course. He's brilliant because he's someone he really believes in what he's doing. He believes in what that course can do for people in a positive way. And all the stuff that he says, first of all, he's a very good speaker. He does very well. He doesn't stumble his lines when he's out there, but he does genuinely try to teach you stuff out there. And he seems like he cares about you learning from this experience. But one of the moments that's kind of seared into my brain was, I think it was after the log carry up the mountain, a very, very difficult task, one of them. I just remember being really, really cold, really wet, and completely drained. And at that point we were lined up, and the other DS, especially Ollie Ollerton and Billy and Jason Fox would always, if we were just sat there like heads down, they would tell us, look, get your heads up, have some pride about you. And you'd kind of realize, okay, stand with a bit of, stand to attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Ant would come along and say, look, this is what we want you to experience. This is a simple little taste of our world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of hit me because I thought, well, imagine doing this, what we've just done, but being shot at, having bombs going off, right? This is what they go through. So you have a lot of respect then for that. But when he said to us, this is our world, this is what we go through, it helped you kind of understand that you can rise to it, you can experience that, and you can find, he's always into trying to find your true self, and if you expose yourself to it, you can really learn a lot about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's good. He does try to push people. Everyone's different, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Different recruits have different, or he behaves, I think, differently depending on what their personality is like. Yeah, that's it, I reckon.
Yeah, he definitely, it comes through the TV, how wise he is, how strong he is, and that what a true teacher he is, because a true teacher will call you out on all of your BS and expose you because they care, and that definitely comes out in that process. And I am super impressed with him as a SAS officer, but also just as a person and a human being.
I've just to comment on that. I've listened to him, obviously, the time I've seen him on the course, and
Mm-hmm.
afterwards I've read a few of his books, and to me, no one's perfect, none
Mm-hmm.
of us are, but he comes across as someone, a lot of the stuff he says, I've kind of touched upon it before, I've seen it in different forms, but he does come across as someone who's found it himself through self-reflection. He's gone through difficult times, and he's come, I went to his talk recently. He said, look, I'm not an intellectual, I'm not some philosopher or whatever, but you can just see that he's experienced all this stuff from his military days, his post-military days, and currently, and he does reflect on it, and he tries to learn things from it, and he does touch upon some very timeless concepts, which are very important. And then he likes to spread them and help others with that as well. So I think that's very endearing qualities. He's passionate, and he self-reflects. So I think that's really why he comes across the way you just described. Yeah.
Yeah, those are superpowers. If people really want a superpower, self-reflection and being honest with yourself is a great ground level to start with.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what would you say were some of your biggest lessons that you learned by participating in ASA or SAS?
The one lesson was to see them at their performance level, the DS, to see that thing that was at one point seemed like a legendary thing, to see it in real life, to see that's possible. I think even if you're around that, some of that rubs off on you. It's just the way it is. You do believe in your belief, your self-belief goes up. I had moments of lack of self-belief, of self-doubt, which held me back, which I've had. Then once you come out, you look back, which wasn't a new thing on the course. If I look back with the lens of self-reflection prior to the course in bits of my life, it was there as well, Mm-hmm. And then it really came to the force, and I looked at afterwards, I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to stop doubting myself. And that's been a big process over the last 2 years. It's not completely complete, but I found myself after the course pushing myself forwards in situations where I previously wouldn't have done because it was a little bit more comfortable not to do. And the risk of failure was substantially less by not pushing myself forward. I could have stayed in the comfortable zone. But I found myself pushing myself into uncomfortable positions. First, with the desire to just experience it and see what happens and kind of keep that, what we had on SAS, keep that spark going. And now as time has gone on, I do it because I actually have started to believe in myself. The imposter syndrome business, that's all going. And it's been a difficult journey for me because I always thought I wanted to avoid the fine line between self-confidence and arrogance. So I do sincerely hope I've kept it on the self-confidence side, but now I do stuff, I put myself forward and I genuinely believe I can make a good shot of it. And I think that's been a really, really invaluable lesson for me in that, you know, as a young man, that stage of my life to have had. Other things were just kind of knowing how you react in a very intense physical situation. So when you're really depleted, experiencing that. And, you know, once you touch that once or twice or several times, like we did on the course, it prepares you for life. You know that life will only get so hard, but you know there's a level way beyond it that you did touch and you did achieve. So you believe in yourself, your confidence goes up, your worrying and your fear, you know, it is a bit of a Zen state. You're very calm and no obstacle is seen as too large. And that's, I dare say, obviously I'm not in the special forces, but having read about them and we spent that time with them, I think that's one of their greatest abilities, to fully believe in themselves and realize nothing's too big and we and the team will get through it. So those lessons, yeah, I'm really grateful for those lessons.
That's so cool. Would you do it again if given the opportunity?
Yeah.
Would you recommend it, that everybody should do something like this just for their own personal growth and self-improvement?
Definitely. I'd say obviously get some training in, don't just turn up cold, but yeah, it's a, you know, even if you're not spiritual, it's a spiritual experience, it's a physical experience. You gain so much from it. It's all the stuff we see today is about, you know, the mental health, you know, the people suffering and, you know, not knowing their direction in life, youngsters, you know, confused and all that. This is the remedy to it, you know. And on a smaller scale, you don't have to go on a special forces selection TV show or boot camp. It can all begin by you taking the decision to just find challenges for yourself, no matter how small. It always starts off small. And then, like when you're training in the gym, you start off with a small amount of weight and you build it up. Your challenges start off small and you just go on that journey where you just build up slowly. And before you know it, you look back in a year's time, 2 years' time, and you've come a long way. And I think that mentality could probably save the world if we all did it. I would save up all these mental health problems and people's behavior, and, you know, it will give people self-belief. I think people lack self-belief. And that's the root of all problems. Is, again, it's not you're not meant to be arrogant and be this kind of posturing gorilla type, but people aren't kind, and we don't tell each other enough that, hey, you're doing a good job, man, you know. And then I think that really seeps into people's mentality, and the world is relatively full of negativity and comparisons between unachievable goals, and you have to believe in yourself, but that belief doesn't come easily. It has to be earned. And the earning comes from facing the dragon of the pain and suffering. And that can be a small dragon first, and then you get bigger and bigger dragons.
Most definitely. I think just, you know, starting with yourself, and if you can find like-minded individuals that also are on the path of self-improvement and challenges, you know, birds of a feather flock together. So you definitely want to surround yourself with those positive people that are striving to be better in their own life and in their, whether it's personally or professionally.
Exactly.
And Go ahead.
No, go on.
Oh, just to touch on the comparison, because we live in such an interesting time where people can compare themselves with 1 billion people now. You know, you go on Facebook, you're comparing yourself to 4 or 5 million billion people, however many's on Facebook. And that's not normal and that's not natural for us to be comparing ourselves like that. So I think dialing it down to perspective and to your life, and that it's not any less significant because everybody counts. But I think that, you know, trying to find maybe that personal relationship with yourself and challenging yourself is really key.
And I had that a lot. I've always been someone who's compared himself to others for all my life, really, because, and there's benefit to that. It's not all a negative. There's, you know, if you're say in the professional world amongst peers, doctors, and they have a good standard, you want to be of a good standard as well. If you're in the musical world, you want to match your peers physically. When I did martial arts, you want to be a good fighter like everybody else. But there's a balance, right? And you have to. It's good to compare. It's, in a way, it's good to have a rival. It's good to have a target in a healthy way. To say, look, you know, I'm in the gym, and that guy is bigger than me. I want to be bigger than you. You know, that's not too bad. But it's a balance where you keep it at a sensible level, and you realize that that's fine. That's a good target to have. But really, what you need to most of the things we talk about is a very fine balance between having a negative effect and a positive effect, right? So it's good to have people to compare yourself to, but at the end of the day, you have to remember, as long as you are getting better, right? And you know, you on the surface of it, the person you're comparing yourself to, you might think they're similar to you, but their whole life, their background, their circumstances are probably completely different, you know. And it's a bit of a cliche, but we are all unique, right? All our backgrounds, our situations, our circumstances are very different. So there's probably no one else like me or like you. So to fully compare someone doesn't really work. And I think is it Simon Sinek said this thing about playing the infinite game as opposed to playing the finite game. So he talked about in the context of business, but the finite game is when you're comparing yourself to your competitors and you're trying to do one better than them, and you're watching them and thinking, oh, they've done this, so we have to do this. It's very reactive, you could say, right? But then what happens there is once if you eventually beat the competitors, you're not really competing against anyone, and you kind of have there's a danger of going stale until some new kid on the block comes and just, you know, blows you out of the water and takes the first place. The infinite game is where you just focus on yourself and you just keep applying constant improvements to yourself, because that is infinite. It's not finite, because there's not a point where you do beat the competition, because you're always the competition. So there's always a new level to achieve. It's infinite. And in that way, yeah, you might have times in the life where you're surrounded by people who are wiping the floor with you and you're crap. But if you keep playing the infinite game and work on yourself, one day you probably will be amongst the best. And you know, that's what I think he described Apple and Microsoft like that. He talked about Microsoft who played a finite game with some of their products, and they didn't kick off. And where Apple was just about improving their own services, looking at how they serve their customers, etc. And they are where they are now in terms of things like the iPhones, etc. So yeah, infinite and finite game is important.
Very important. With regards to just comparing yourself, especially when you compare yourself to your younger self, you know, if you're like 60 and you're trying to compare yourself to when you were 30, you know, we go through these changes, and some people change drastically in 1 year because of a health problem, a health issue that, you know, comes upon them and maybe affects them physically, and they're not able to do what they did just last year. So we're always going to be challenged. That's just life and the way that the cake has been baked. But I think this is the key.
That's right, and that's a good point you've made. And I guess I'm still inexperienced, and I'd say relatively young, because actually what you just made me think about right now was if I look back now, I'm 34, so generally speaking, my life has been an upwards trajectory because, you know, going for university, junior training as a doctor, and I'm in a good place. Physically, I've got stronger and fitter, etc. But when you mentioned the word 60, I guess sometimes, isn't it, if I'm 60 and 70, I'll be looking back at now, I might be a little bit slower when I'm 70, right? So yep. I have to deal with it somehow. And that, yeah. Right? Now, my mindset is such, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to try and keep pushing. But yeah, that's an interesting way of how you, I guess, wisdom comes into play then, isn't the wisdom of age, how you accept the change. Yeah.
Yeah. And even at 34 right now, you can have preparation for when you're 60. You can have your game plan when you're 70. I saw the other day, Clint Eastwood, movie star, he turned 91 and he's in phenomenal shape, has his wits about him. And they're asking him kind of, what's your secret to, you know, still being strong and healthy at 91? And he said, I don't let the old man in. Okay. And I was like, that's really good. Cause it's so much of this is here, just, you know, going back to that control you were talking about, that you know, all the control is taken away. So now it's all narrowed down to just basically what's in your head. And it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, you know, when he was in the Nazi concentration camps and they took away everything. They tried to strip his integrity and all that, but he said, you can't take away my mind. And that's, I think, that's something that will always be with you at whatever age or stage in life.
That is such a powerful concept. And I think if we all grasp that, it would really change how we operate in the world and our lives. And that's the teachings I've had as a child from the Sikh faith have been exactly like that, because, you know, when it all is stripped from you, you still have your mind, you know, and that's really important. But that it needs training. You need to go into those places. You need to meditate on that, to reflect upon it. We don't really connect with minds. We don't connect with ourselves anymore. We don't sit in silence and solitude and look inside. We're always now looking outside, right? You mentioned about Clint Eastwood. What he doesn't let the old man in. I mean, again, it's a mindset, isn't it? So you're not accepting, you know, you're old, obviously, but what I've done I like to think I'm quite observant. I like asking weird questions about why things happen in life. But as a doctor now and as a medical student, so I guess I started medical school in about 2006. So it's been 15 years in the field, you could say, of medicine. And I always ask myself the question, what's the difference between certain 70-year-olds and certain 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds? You see some very sprightly, fit, young-looking people in their 80s, and you see people in their 70s are just kind of just lost the will to live, and they move. Now, obviously, everyone has good and bad luck. So some people have suffered from, you know, strokes, and they've had bad injuries and whatnot. But a lot of the time, after talking to them, so I would always talk to them, and I found that the ones who were still doing really well in their older age had that very mindset. You know, they spoke to me like they were at my level, like we were youngsters talking. They would talk about, they had this passion for life. So it doesn't matter what they did. They might be playing golf or playing with their grandkids or sewing stuff, but they had that passion and that, you know, that wonder that kids have, that light in their eyes. And I think if you're lucky enough to have avoided things like a stroke or unfortunate injuries like breaking your hip and, you know, the bad stuff that happens, and you keep that passion going in your head, that's probably what keeps you going into the 80s and the 90s, into old age.
Absolutely. Having that passion, having something to do, something to look forward to, something to take care of. Those are all very key. You mentioned meditation, and I'm in no means an expert in meditation, but I do see its powerful effect. And I know one meditation that people tend to work on is letting go, that meditation, because throughout life, you have to let go of everything, even your own life at the end. And so that's a practice that we can do as far as like strengthening that muscle for those tough times. It's letting go.
Very true. And that's exactly it. It's an exercise. Just like you said, it's like a muscle. You have to train it. And there's many different aspects. So there's letting go, is to say there's to have no attachment in to some degree, to not be attached to things. You can love, you should love unreservedly, but attachment it's a subtle difference. But I guess it's knowing that things are mortal and that things will eventually go, and to meditate on that, to tell your mind that that's going to happen, right? So you kind of, it's the Stoic, another concept, premeditatio malorum. So that's in Latin, is that meditate on the bad before it happens. So you're kind of aware of it happening. And when the scorpion stings, its sting is slightly less because you've somewhat experienced it before. The other, so it sounds quite sad and a bit unhappy, but actually it's just preparing your mind. And it's, I guess, by exposing yourself to it mentally, you are giving yourself a position of strength, because when it happens, if it happens, you're not caught unawares, and you can therefore have a better response for yourself and also for the people around you. The other thing I want to mention about meditation, which is really important, which kind of ties in with all the SAS business and the physical aspect, is outcomes and desire. And I've struggled with this concept for many years, because when I was in my teens, I did Taekwondo, nothing special, just used to go down to the evening class in my local town twice a week. But I read a lot about Bruce Lee, and I was in that environment of watching fighters and trying to get in the mindset. And I wasn't a great fighter, I was kind of average, and I'd try and fight with the strong guys so I could be exposed to that. But Bruce Lee, the concept was always about, don't have desire to win. That will bog you down. Don't have, and I used to sometimes want to win or not want to do anything for fear of being attacked, because if you attack, you expose yourself to a counterattack, and then there's the fear of pain and suffering. And so what was I doing? My mind was fixed upon winning and losing, right? So I was bogged down by it. When I'm training in the gym now, if I'm doing heavy lifts, sometimes I'm too concerned about making the lift, getting the job done, and what's going to happen. Oh, I've still got this much to do, and I've got this heavy set to do. When you're on SAS, oh God, how much longer is this going to go on for? We've just done 3 miles, and they just said, go and do it again. And your mind is now looking at that 3 mile in the distance. It's too much, it's saying to you, right? So the meditation, what you need to do, everyone's mindfulness and all that is a big popular thing nowadays. It's a bit of a buzzword, right? And it's a good thing to do. But what meditation needs to do is to silence your mind and bring it into the present. And I used to think that meant to not care about the outcome. But that's a mistake. It's not that you don't care about the outcome. It's you don't know the outcome. You don't know of the outcome. So in your mind, there is no outcome. There is just the now and the doing. Yeah. So it's not that you don't care about the outcome. You just make yourself unaware of it. So you don't care about the 3 miles left to do. You care about the 2 meters of ground ahead of you. You're taking the next steps, carry on. You're doing a heavy squat workout. You don't care that your target was 5 reps. Just focus on that 1 rep and then the next rep, right? And then that's where you can turn your training into meditation. It's like it's like a controlled fury where you have to take in all the energy that you've got, all that negative energy, bring it in and focus exactly in the moment. And we can use all the physical training that we do as a training to teach us mindfulness by bringing the mind into the present moment. Once you're in the present moment, your abilities really, really increase.
Absolutely, because you're not worried about the past, you're not thinking about the future. You can just handle that moment in time. And that's all life is. It's just one moment after the other. And so focus on the one that you're having at hand.
Exactly. And
Yes.
I found that in training, it really helped, because Bruce Lee says this thing about, there's this famous line he talks about. He says, when my opponent contracts, I expand. When he expands, I contract. And then he says, I do not hit, it hits all by itself, and he points to his fist. And I think he's mentioning just that he's not caring about what's going to happen. When the opportunity happens, it just hits by itself because you're in the moment, and that's a really stress-free place to be, in the moment.
Or I like to say the power of the pause, like before reacting, that pause.
Yeah.
It might be a millisecond that you get. That's where your power is. That's where your peace is. And most people skip it, forget it, ignore it, deny that power of the pause.
That's more like emotional, isn't it? When we're in like a angry situation, argument or something, and in those situations, there's you in the situation, but you want to maintain an overview. You want to be looking at yourself like someone who's outside, and you want to look at yourself. Am I proud of how I'm behaving right now? And not be sucked into that vortex of emotion. And I think that's how you conduct yourself in a sensible, useful manner.
Yeah. And it's practice. It's a muscle. Like I mean, we're human and fallible and not perfect. But the more that you can be cognizant and practice and use meditation for those difficult times, I think is a really good tip and strategy. Very cool. So we're getting to the end here. Is there anything else or just last minute thoughts about SAS experience or just Stoic principles that you would like to share?
I would just say that I mentioned this a few times, generally, is I think it's just important to have a goal in your life, kind of figure out, spend some time on your own in solitude and highlight what's really important to you, and then decide what you're going to do to get it, and to then you got to really find what makes you tick, what drives you, and that can be anything really. Hopefully it's a good thing, you know, you don't tend to a life of crime or anything like that, but you know, you want to have good moral standards, hopefully a good foundation of moral standards, and then it's just about being honest with yourself, being open to criticism. Criticism is really good. People shy away from it. You see it on social media all the time. Any form of criticism is met with just a big, you know, a heavy reaction of defensiveness. But you know, having some kind of idea or doing something and exposing it to criticism is good, because then you learn where your faults are and you can improve. And then it's just important to find small challenges. Really, it all begins with small challenges. Don't be too ambitious at first, because then you end up falling flat on your face. Small challenges which you can achieve, and in any field of your life, you know, it doesn't have to be physical, it can be anything you're struggling with. And then once you achieve a success in one of those small challenges, it propels you to the next step, to the next challenge. And slowly that builds self-belief in the conscious mind, because you know that, oh, I did it. You know, it gives you that confidence. But I also believe it subconsciously teaches your brain that things are possible. So the negative thoughts start to reduce. And finally, that's one of the things I learned from SAS was Aunt Middleton in his book. He mentions this concept of godlike responsibility that he had. And what it was, I found it hard to understand first, but he believed that, you know, when he was climbing Everest or doing things, he believed that he was in control of himself completely. Every step he made was up to him and he had to do it. And it was all about the self-belief that this is not going to go wrong. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I think that mindset, and we mentioned it before as well, about the self-belief, is what I feel is what the special forces have. That's what gives them the ability to do what they do. What we look at them and stand in awe of, that's the root of it, and that's their superpower. And they shared a little bit of that with us. They showed us a bit of it, and now it's up to us to keep the small challenges so we can also experience that. And then, you know, the world is our oyster, as they say.
That is so good. It reminds me of the term internal locus of control, where it's up to the individual. You're not putting it out there that's having control over you. And so you need to harness and really hone that internal locus of control. Another key point that just kind of popped in my head as you were talking, and those were all excellent, is even if you're having like a negative challenge and you don't want to, let's say you're depressed, you're dealing with depression, and instead of looking at it as a negative challenge, look at it as, oh, I'm being tested by depression. All right, let's see what I can do with this, and approach it, because perception and perspective of the situation is also really, I think, key. And it gives you that extra push that you need to do when facing challenges, especially the really hard negative ones.
That's true. And yeah, and I really feel for people who have to go through things like depression and, you know, the psychological illnesses. I think there is a place for that degree of cognitive response from the self. But then obviously when you get into places like, you know, real clinical depression, full blown, you know, then it can be very difficult. So people like you, I think people are being professional help then from psychiatry or whatever. But definitely speaking, I think people on the spectrum of close to normal, but dipping into the depressive elements, you know, it all depends on your background, isn't it? So mental health is a spectrum. So if you come from a background where you have those bits of positivity already, you're going to have more of a ability to compensate and a bit more of a defense against it. Whereas if you've come from a life of hardship, abuse, just a crap, horrible life, you're not going to have built up those defense mechanisms, so that it can be really difficult as well. So yeah, I think if you have it, then try and use it. But yeah, that's a hard one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, very cool. I do appreciate you coming on my channel, and I wish you all the best with your eye surgeon training and so forth, and just, keep being an inspiration, because you definitely were watching season 5 of SAS. Lots of interesting characters on there, and I would definitely put you in that category.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And, it's just, I always think I'm just lucky to have had opportunities, and just you try and make the most of them, and you just try and be honest to whatever moral code you've decided to live by, and the rest just happens. So yeah, I'm really appreciate you having me, and it's been really nice having this talk as well. And you learn stuff. You talk to someone, and you realize where I've learned things talking to you, and it's just been really a really good experience.
Likewise. Thank you so much. If you guys like this video, please share and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to share and subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted to when the next video drops. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.